No, I lied. It's not too much time. I'm freaking out. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. How long does it take me to make a knife? I make knives, and every time someone learns that, they ask, how long does it take? Well, it varies a lot. You can put a little bit of time in, or you can put a ton of time in. So today, I've got a challenge for myself. I'm going to make the same knife 3 times. The first time, I'll only give myself 1 hour. The second time, I'm going to give myself 1 day. And for the third knife, I'm going to give myself 1 week to work on it. That way we'll be able to see what is different with a 1 hour, 1 day, or 1 week knife build. First up, 1 hour. Now, the timer hasn't started just yet. I do have some things I'm gonna explain and set up. This is the shape. I'm gonna be using the same shape for all 3 knives. That makes a better comparison, I think. And I'm going to be using this bar of 01 tool steel. So with my steel and my knife shape, it's time to get started and make a knife in 1 hour. The 1 hour countdown begins now. So step 1 is actually not right here, it's outside. I'm going to be using this furnace for the heat treatment, but I want it to be nice and hot when it's time for that. So I'm getting it started now. It's going. I love knife making, and I've been doing it for a few years, so at this point I think I'm at least pretty good, but when I started, I know I felt very out of my depth. Every part of it was learning a new skill that I didn't know, and when I was doing that, I was watching tons of instructional videos, lots of online classes on how to do every different aspect of it. Pretty much every time I've got a new skill or hobby I'm trying to develop, my first go-to is to find the best online videos that teach me how to do it. I found that a great place to learn new skills and techniques and hobbies is Skillshare. They're the sponsor of today's video, and it is a great place to learn new skills and grow your creativity. Right now, I'm working on learning how to 3D model better, like learning how to digitally sculpt stuff, and I am just loving how many classes on all of the different 3D modelings are available. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives. It's got thousands of classes led by experts on topics like design, film, and even productivity. It can help you take your passion, your hobbies, or your career to the next level. With these classes designed to help you from the very beginning levels all the way up to expert, you can really boost your creative skills to the levels you want them to be. If you've been looking to learn a new skill or boost your creative powers or just find great ways to get more done in a day, there has never been a better time to join Skillshare. The first 500 people to use my link down in the description will receive a free 1-month trial to Skillshare. Get started today. All right, got the basic profile shaped out. Now I am using this blue marking fluid to show me where the middle of the blade is so I can grind aiming at that midpoint. So I want to go down to about 0.9. That'll be just off of center. That gave a little bit of a line. Why is it not, is this not straight? Weird. I have 43 minutes and 29 seconds remaining. Less. Where is my blade guard, I wonder? Gonna have to freehand it. No time for looking. Primary bevel has been added. Now I just need a couple of holes for pins, and for a design reference, there's gonna be sort of the handle is gonna go kind of like that. So I want a pin, I don't know, maybe one right there and one right there. That should do it. Drilling oil is missing, I need that. Okay, where, the WD-40, where were I just? That'll work. It's not cutting oil, but I can't find the cutting oil, so. Oh, those aren't good sounds. Not good sounds at all. freaking fantastic. That's all the time I'm taking. Should do a lot more. Time, we are halfway through. It's panic inducing. I need a piece of wire. That will work. I'll be able to lower it down in, get it hot, pull it out. Cool.
This is just to get the oil hot. I mean, not hot, but it needs to be kind of warm. Put the lid back on. I'm going to heat treat down into one of these burner holes. Rotate this burner hole over here. Great. Okay, this is a big old magnet stuck to my bar of metal. I'm going to use this for my heat treatment testing. I need this knife to get hot enough that it's no longer attracted to the magnet. That's when I know it's at a temperature that I can quench it into the oil. As of right now, for an example, ooh, we're actually pretty close. Barely attached. Okay, the tip is probably hot enough. The rest of the metal needs to get to that point. We're in kind of bright daylight, so it's not going to be glowing very brightly. All right, we're good on temperature. Just gonna let it sit in there for like a minute because it is supposed to soak a little bit at temperature. It's not gonna get an idealized heat treatment. It's gonna get what it gets. All right, here goes. 3, 2, 1, and in. Moving it back and forth inside there. Good, all right. Carrying on, it's looking good. So right now, hopefully this knife is in its fully hardened state, and I actually have to temper it, but because I don't have time to do a proper tempering, I'm going to use a blowtorch and do a heat-based tempering. But right now it's all black. I need to bring it back to silver so I can see when it changes color correctly. Whew. 20 minutes. My goal is now to hit it with the blowtorch until it heats up, until it's sort of a straw color or even a little bit heading into blue. I want to keep it on the lighter, like the straw color more. That's better, but if it goes a little too far, nothing I can do about it. Whew, too far. It's going too fast. Quenching it's not really a good idea. That's why I was testing it on the handle. Well, I think I got too hot, and I think cooling it down that fast in the water wasn't a good idea. Doesn't matter at this point. I only have like 16 minutes and 20 seconds left. I still have to get a handle on it. Ah, 13 minutes. Okay, can use composite, blue. Cool. That just snapped off. Even going through the metal, I don't even, oh, that was the wrong size, that's why. Bollocks. Okay, well, now we're only gonna have one pin because I can't get the drill bit out of the old one. This is the jankiest thing I've ever done, and no one should ever do this. Eight minutes. I had this 5-minute epoxy set out. I don't have 5 minutes. I have 8 total. So this is getting super glued on. It is not a good choice for a nice permanent bond. Oh, I didn't even shape the front of it. Bollocks. All right. I have to very, very quickly. What do I have? 6 minutes. Plenty of time. Plenty of time. All the time in the world. It's too much time, really. No! I lied, it's not too much time, I'm freaking out!
One minute, still have a minute, okay. 3, 2, 1. That is a completed knife in 1 hour. Okay. 1 hour to make a knife. It's metal, it's heat treated, at least somewhat right. It has a handle, it is functional, and it's kind of sharp. I'm gonna say that checks all of the boxes for being a knife. There were a lot of firsts on this. I mostly make knives out of stainless steel. This was something called 01 tool steel. That's why I quenched it in oil, which is what probably most of you were expecting to see, but it's not what I usually do. The tempering with a blowtorch was definitely an adventure, and I don't think I got the temper just right. But overall, I did it. I got this done in 1 hour, which is not something I've ever even come close to doing before. It's not the most comfortable, but I can use it, I can hold it, and I'm pretty sure it will cut stuff. Count that as a win. Next up, making a knife in 1 day. It is currently 9:12 a.m. So the plan is to give it one standard work day, which means that about 5:15 today is when I'm going to declare it's over. I'm going to be using the same knife shape, general pattern profile. I've got my bar of steel. It's time. Process is pretty much the same as before. I just remembered that, like yesterday, I do want to get my heat source started. I'm using the kiln today, not the furnace. It's way more precise, and I have time to let it heat it up rather than just the fire in the furnace. All right, back to cutting out the blank. This knife is going to have, it's called jimping on the back of it. It's little lines that are filed into it that give your thumb some grip when you're holding and using the knife. This right here is a file guide. It's got carbide plates that are harder than my files. So I can use this, clamp it onto the knife, and I can use it both for the belt grinder and for hand files to keep precision alignment and make sure I don't file or grind where I don't want to. And to do this, I'm using what's called a jimping file or a checkering file. Normally, files are designed with the cuts going across it at different angles, or sometimes all one angle. And the idea is that when you move it over a piece of metal, it takes away just a thin layer. But all of these teeth are nicely in line with each other. So if I'm precise about how I drag it, it will only cut in perfectly straight lines. It won't remove the whole surface, just give me some nice little racing stripes across the back of the knife. Those ridges are in the back where my thumb's gonna go. Now I'm using the file guide on the belt grinder. It will help keep the line where the transition from handle to blade is really nice and sharp. Profile is looking good, primary bevels are looking great, the jimping on the back is excellent, and the kiln is ready for heat treatment. But I still need to put some holes in this. It's gonna have pins made of this nice brass rod. I think I'm gonna do 3 of them. That's gonna be 3 times more pins than I managed to get in my 1 hour knife. Let's get drilling. All right, the knife is all ready for heat treatment, so it's gonna go into the kiln. It's gonna stay in there. I'm gonna watch the temperature. When I put the knife in, it'll involve opening the door, the knife will absorb heat, the temperature will drop. I'll wait for it to get back up to the right temperature, which in this case, I'm doing 1460 Fahrenheit. I'm gonna wait for it to get back up to there. After it hits that, I'll wait about 10 minutes to let the metal soak at that temperature. Then I'll take it out, plunge it in oil. It had so much scale on it. Fan did an excellent job. So now this needs to temper. With the 1 hour knife, I tried doing that with a blowtorch. Mixed results. And normally I like to temper it in this kiln, but this kiln is still 1300 degrees Fahrenheit and would take about an hour to cool down, even with the door open, to the temperature I need. So I'm just gonna use my normal house oven and I'm gonna put it in there. And a good temper would be 2 hours, take it out, let it cool down, and then back in for another 2 hours. I'm still on a limited time today, so I'm only gonna do a 1 hour, one-time temper. It's not ideal, but it should still get the steel to a good point. Leave it for an hour. For the handle on the 1 hour knife, I used this stuff because it needed very little work. I could just glue it on and I'm done. I have a little bit of time, especially while the knife is tempering, to do something a little fancier. So I've got this fun stabilized dyed wood, and I'm going to be making what's called a liner, which is I'm going to glue these down onto this piece of composite, and then that is what I'm going to cut the shapes out of. These are not currently flat enough, so I got to flatten them out and then I'll glue them down. All right. Making handles. Okay. Looking good. Good, 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 good. The knife is just cooling down until I can handle it. It's best to let it come down to temperature on its own at least a little bit before I use water to cool it down the rest of the way. So I'm just gonna cut these out off of this plate. Well, still on the plate, but you get it. Cooled down, able to be handled. This is looking good. It's feeling good. Got a little bit of a warp in it. We're gonna have to grind or bend that out. Not bad though. Let's clean it up and see how it looks. It's a little bit after noon, and I gave myself until 5:15, which means timing is actually going really well. I'm actually ahead of where I thought it would be. So to give this knife the best strength and function possible, I'm actually gonna give it that second temper that I was gonna cut out. So this is gonna go back into the oven, and I'll have a little more cleanup work after that, but that's really going to improve how well this knife functions in the future, and I got a little more time than I expected, so I think it's definitely worth it. The kiln has now cooled off enough that I can heat it back up to do the second tempering cycle in the kiln instead of my home oven. This is a lot more precise, so in we go. Temper number 2. All right, that should do it for a second temper. Yep, ooh, look at that lovely color, like a bronze hue to it.
With just the bronze blade.
The general grinding and cleanup is done. I've got tape covering the part of the blade that I'm not trying to work on right now. It ended up kind of bronze colored, and that wasn't on purpose, but I'm gonna run with it because it looks really cool. So the rest of the knife I'm going to be finishing with this. It's called a Scotch-Brite belt. It's designed for giving a really nice like satin brushed look, which I think will go really well with the rest of the blade. And it's a lot like those scrubbing sponges you use in your dishes, but maybe a little more abrasive. Let's do it. Lovely finish, looking good. Time to put the handle on. There's a few steps involved in that. It's basically done, right? I mean, it's got a handle on it. Pretty solid knife. All right, I'll do more cleanup work on it. Clean off some extra handle bits. Fronts of the scales look great. Time to attach everything to the knife. Sharpening here is the very last step. I've got 9 minutes, so doing pretty well. And technically I started at like 9:12, 9:13, but timing's working out great. I got time to sharpen it and then I'll be done. The knife is complete and I have minutes to spare. Whew, I like this. This came out really nice. There's definitely refinement that could still happen if I had more time, but overall, I think this thing looks great. And I got that added bonus of the bronze colored blade totally by luck. I like it, and I've sharpened it. I've spent some time sharpening. Let's see how we do here. You know, I've used better and I've used worse. It's sharp, it cuts through the paper. I think it'll do a good job holding an edge. Overall, we got our 1 hour, we got our 1 day. Let's see what we can get in a week. It is time for knife number 3, the one I'm gonna give a whole week to work on. The beginning process is the same thing. I take the knife profile, I cut it out of a bar of steel. I am using a different type of steel. The other 2 knives have been 01. This is W2 steel, and you'll see the reason for that later. With my extra time that I have, I'm actually gonna make just a couple of tweaks to the overall design. I wanna make it just a little bit more aggressive feeling, and I wanna add a couple other little details to it, including here on the back, I'm gonna have space for a lanyard hole. So I'm just gonna draw a little extra onto the back here. And I also think that I'm gonna make the bottom handle profile just a little different. So we've got the same basic design. Just a couple of things are gonna be tweaked a tiny bit. If I compare the new, the W2 to the old, the 01, it's actually noticeably thicker. This is the new one, this is the old one. The old one was already more than thick enough. So one of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm going to use the surface grinder and I'm going to thin the new steel down. So it's at least as thin as the original. Maybe even I'll go thinner. I'm gonna do the same thing but with a smoother belt just to smooth this off. Okay, that is definitely thinner, but it also picked up a bit of a bend, which is not terribly surprising. I just took a lot of material off of one side and not the other. That brings in new stresses. So I'm just gonna try and manually bend this back a little bit, try and get it straight. And if that doesn't work, then I'm just gonna grind off of the other side. Good progress. The steel right now is in what's called an annealed state. That's as soft as it's gonna get. And when it's in its annealed state, you can bend it pretty easily. So I'm not even using very much pressure here, and I'm managing to straighten it out a good amount. I do have leverage, which is of course the reason I'm using the vise. Not a ton of pressure needed. Okay, that is pretty good. I am gonna use the grinder just to smooth it back out, but we're making progress. Got both sides clean, looking good, but I ground off my knife profile, so I have to draw that back on. Got it thinned out. I got the profile redrawn back on there, but there is actually another step I'm gonna do before I cut it out. On this knife, I want to have what's called a fuller. You may have seen this on knives or swords before. It's a sort of ditch that runs back along the spine of the blade, and so it's just like a cavity. It doesn't go all the way through. It's just like a line where it's like engraved out in a nice trough, and I'm going to add one of these onto this knife, but I'm going to do it before I cut out the shape of the knife because I'm gonna use a mill, and it's a lot easier to grab onto these sides than it would be to grab onto something that's actually knife shaped. Fuller one, looking good. Okay, channel. Hopefully those are perfectly lined up with each other. They look pretty good. Now we move on to the same thing I've done before, cutting out the profile outline of the knife. All right, I've done some hand sanding, especially on the blade here, these bevels that I've been grinding in, and there's a reason. It's related to why I'm using a different steel. So this is W2 steel, and I'm using it because this is something that can take a hamon. That's a line you can get that's mostly decorative, but has a function that looks kind of like that line on a samurai sword right on the blade. That comes from cooling down the metal at different speeds when you plunge it into the oil. And it works a lot better if you do a really nice hand sand before you apply it. So now it's time to mix up some of that clay and apply it to the blade. All right, this is like a refractory clay. It's designed to take high heat really nicely. This stuff is specially made for this exact purpose. Just going to add some water to this until it becomes kind of a thick paste. And I should say, I've watched lots of videos of people making these and instructional videos on how to get it to turn out right. This is my first time trying to do a hamon. I've never attempted this before. Will it turn out well? It's a bit of a mystery still. Was this too long of a stir stick? Yeah. This works with W2 because W2 is a very fast quenching steel. It doesn't take long to get down to the temperature and to have that new grain structure starting, which is what makes a knife harden. Okay, we have our clay on the blade. Like I said, I've never done this before. I'm following as best as I can instructions on how to do this, but the next step is to just let this dry. So I'm actually gonna let it dry overnight and do the heat treatment tomorrow morning. End of day one, I guess. Our clay is dry, it's looking good, and again, I've never done this before, but I think that's what it's supposed to look like. So time to go into the kiln, let it get up to temperature, wait there for about 10 minutes, and then it goes into the oil to cool. There it goes.
1 hour later.
It is time for the quench. I want to put it in blade down, not blade up, but the blade is currently pointed up, so I'm gonna try and grab it and then turn it. This might be a little messy, but here goes. That fan thing works great. That's gonna cool down. That's gonna cool down. Once it's cooled down enough that I can do a tempering cycle, it's gonna go into the oven for a tempering cycle, which is gonna give it the full time this time. I got the whole week. It's gonna go in for 2 hours, come out and cool down, go back in for another 2-hour temper. That's the proper way to do it. There's markings on the blade. It almost kind of looks like maybe that's sort of what I was going for. This is actually just oxides built up on the outside of the blade. This is not showing if I got a good real hamon on the inside of the metal. We probably won't see that until after I've done all the heat treatment and re-ground back to the final finished surface, but I'm just doing a little bit of cleanup with some sandpaper to see if I can take off some of those carbides a little bit. Just doing a little bit of prep for the handles while I'm waiting on some stuff. So I'm gonna be using this really nice dyed emerald colored wood. It's just a very nice color that I think is gonna look very nice on this knife. And I'm just gonna give it like a liner. So I've got these pieces of plastic. It's just gonna make a little division between the wood and the metal. It looks nice. Make sure the glue is gonna bond. I gotta rough up the wood. On the last knife, I used a 5-minute epoxy. This is not that. This is an epoxy that you let set overnight. Slower cure time, higher strength. All right, temper cycle number 1. Heat treatment is complete. The knife is looking really good. We've got some nice rainbowy colors on there from the tempering cycle. Not gonna be leaving those on, not trying to get that on the blade. We've got our own plans. We're trying to get that hamon to pop. Still an experiment, not sure how it's gonna turn out, but it's time for a little bit of cleanup on the belt grinder, and then we're gonna move to hand sanding again. Okay, time for hand sanding, everyone's favorite part. So now is the time for the etch. I've got ferric chloride, which I'm going to dilute with water. I've seen like 4:1 as a ratio. I don't know what strength they're using. This is a 43% solution of ferric chloride. I don't know if it comes in a lot of others. I'm just gonna try it, see if it's working with the dilution. And the process is going to be swirling the knife down around in the solution for like 30 seconds, maybe a minute, wash it off and re-sand a little bit with some really high grit sandpaper, then go back to the buffing wheel and lightly buff over that. And I am seeing results. Oh, we've got good things happening. That is so cool for a first reveal. Yes, it's working. My first time ever doing a hamon on a knife, and it is looking so good. I'm very happy with how it has turned out. Yeah, this is exciting. Absolutely love it. What a hamon really is called differential hardening. This part of the blade, the very bottom, got hardened more than the steel back here. The clay that I had on the knife prevented it from cooling down as quickly, so it formed a different metal crystalline structure. This part up here is harder, and this part back here where the spine is softer. The blade will hold a really nice edge, and the spine will be softer, meaning if there's any impact or prying, then it's gonna hold up to that without worrying about chipping or snapping as much. But the visual effect comes because the different hardened steels react differently to the ferric chloride that I had it soaking in, and they also polish up differently. So that's why we get the visual differentiation between the part that had the clay on it and the part that did not. So you can see how it reflects my fingers really nicely on the polished part, but much less on the softer spine. Time to get started on the bolsters. I'm gonna be using copper for the bolsters. So that's gonna go right on there, be nicely shaped, and then everything behind the bolster will be beautiful green colored wood that I already glued up to some plastic here. First step is to smooth off my copper. It's slightly bowed on both surfaces, so I need a really nice flat surface. On this knife, when I was adding the handle, I had to shape this front part before I attached it, because once it's attached, it's really hard to do anything. Same thing with these bolsters. I have to shape the front of these bolsters so that once they're attached to the knife, they already look good and I don't have to do any more work on them. All right, with the bolsters on and looking good, time to move on to the rest of the handle. Let's do some cutting and shaping. I'm getting started with the handles, but I am going to have this little lanyard hook on the back. The handles aren't going to cover that. It's going to come right up to the back of that, so if you want to put a lanyard in there, you can. That means I need to clean up this piece of metal, and that's going to be a lot easier before I attach the scales onto the side. So a little bit of cleanup work, and then I'll do some hand cleanup work. Okay, the handle is being glued on. Now that glue is the same stuff we used when we were putting the handle pieces together. It needs to cure overnight. So we are at the end of day 3, and this knife is looking really good. I'm actually ahead of schedule, so that's awesome. All right, it is time to begin shaping the handle. Glue's all cured. Let's get these extra wire bits off. Even before I start any of the shaping stuff, I just have to draw some lines. The edges I have here are entirely too organic. They're flowy and not the same as each other. I need to just clean all of that up. So I'm gonna do some cleanup work, some line measurement before I even start deciding what shape it's gonna be. Handle is looking good, so I think I'm ready to untape the blade and have a finished knife. all that's left is to sharpen this one. And today I'm not in a hurry to do my sharpening, which is gonna be nice. I'm gonna use my diamond stones and get it up to what is hopefully like a nice razor sharp blade. I'm sharpening this knife on a diamond stone. It's the same process as using any whetstone, and I think I've talked about already in the video how most of the time when I make knives, I'm using stainless steels. Stainless steels, by their very nature, are pretty much never as bendy as carbon steels. That's why even with the really nice stainless steels that exist today, if you were gonna try and make something like a sword, you'd probably still want a carbon steel instead of a stainless steel. And that applies here because if you ever have watched any instructional video about sharpening on a whetstone, they're going to talk about how you grind on one side of the knife until you feel the burr forming. That's where a very microscopic small bit of wire edge of the metal starts to curl over. So if I'm sharpening on this side, the metal will curl over onto the other side. And I can feel that with my thumb right now very easily. It didn't take long, it was like 4 passes and I started to feel that burr edge. Stainless steel pretty much doesn't do that. When you sharpen on a whetstone or a diamond stone with stainless steel, you don't really get a burr in the same way. And so following instructional videos when you're using stainless steel can be like confusing, making me think I was doing it wrong because it doesn't form that burr the same way. So now that I'm using a carbon steel for almost the first time, it's like surprising how fast and easily it forms. I'm like, oh, that's why. It's also, I'm sure, technique. Like, I'm fine at sharpening, but I'm not an absolute expert at sharpening. I'm using this diamond stone because there's a YouTube channel called Outdoors 55. He recommended it as a really high quality diamond stone for the price. I think half of his videos he's sharpening stainless steels and he still talks about getting the burr. He's probably just better at feeling it than me. Very happy with how this one has turned out. It is a great quality knife, extremely pleased with the result in pretty much every way, and it's actually only the end of day 4. I still have a day, so I do have a plan for tomorrow, how I'm gonna use some of that time. In the end, it really has only taken me 4 days to make a knife I'm pretty proud of though. Got one little extra bit, but 4 days, and I've got a really nice knife. I'm going to make a sheath for this knife, not these two. Didn't have time. Sorry. I'm gonna go for a pretty basic design. It's gonna be thicker along the back where it's just a fold. Up front, it will be the edge that will get a piece of the thicker layer sandwiched in between as a guard against the blade so I'm not slicing through the stitches. Here's me hoping that the leatherworking crew on YouTube are a very friendly and forgiving lot and aren't gonna point out all of my many mistakes that I assume I'm making, but I don't know because I'm like 85% making this up. I have made leather sheaths before, a couple other things with leather, so I know some of the guiding principles, but not all of them. As a final step for the sheath, I'm going to be applying some neat's foot oil all the way over it, and that should just help preserve it, make it a little flexible, all the good things that neat's foot oil does for leather. All right, look at that. A great fit. I think I gotta try it on my belt though, right?
there you have it, a 1 hour, a 1 day, and a 1 week knife build. Let me know what you guys think of this type of video. If there's anything else you want to see me try and make on one of these alternated scales. This was a really fun project. Really happy with how these turned out. These knives are going to be available for sale. The link for that will be down in the description. Definitely needs a better sharpening job. Not bad, not great. Yeah, that cuts pretty nice. As always, a huge thank you shout out to all of our supporters on Patreon. We could not do these videos without you. If you're interested in joining the Patreon supporters, the link for that is in the description.